Let's start with the policy for this motion first. So let's talk about the age range. We will allow citizens ranging from 20 to 40 years old to join this like mandatory programs. The reason why we choose this age range is to guarantee the health of the participants and the eligibility for each sector depending on their age. For example, for military, we think it would be quite physically demanding depending on the department, but it will be generally quite physically demanding. So we only allow citizens ranging from like the younger age bracket to join it. On the other hand, charity is quite age friendly, meaning when whatever age you have, you could join it because it's not really physically demanding for you. Secondly, let's talk about the period. This program will be mandatory for at least 1 to 2 years, depending on the sector that you work on. The reason why we need 1 to 2 years is because this period of time is long enough for it to be meaningful for you to understand the scope of the job. If it's like several months, you don't really understand who working with who, what is your role in this bigger organization. Secondly, we think that this period of time is enough to offset the initial training cost. Obviously, when we employ a large number of people into a sector, we have to train them, and this costs some money and with other costs. So we believe that this amount of time is reasonable to offset these fixed costs in the beginning. And then it creates the net benefit from this sector. Next is pay. They will be paid similar to the wage of an entry-level employees. So, for example, a soldier who just got into the military will be paid on relatively the same rate as these people who are employed for military. And the reason why it could be similar or relatively similar is because even though these citizens have not a lot of like training prior to this program, they still receive training when they got accepted into the sector. So that is the reason why we think the pay can be similar. Promotion is also available if you feel like you want to commit to this job and you have done a good job and your boss think that is reasonable for you to get promoted, you can. Let's come to our first argument on how this program creates solidarity. So how does this work? Well, the first thing is that during your training, you learn new things and you obviously have to work with other people. This would not be otherwise achieved in real life because in real life, you would have other interests, other concern. You work in different sectors, so it's very difficult for you to have any real-time interaction. But with training and also working alongside each other, it is compulsory and it is unavoidable that you guys have to interact and work and communicate. So it's definitely going to foster bond and mutual understanding between different groups of citizens in one country. This is especially important in very diverse, like culturally and racially diverse countries, where people tend to stay within their community. This creates a good chance for them to actually break all the prejudice and stereotypes and actually understand each other. So why do we think that this solidarity and mutual understanding is really important? First of all, like we said, it can reduce discrimination due to, for example, geo-isolation in real life or just people preferring to be in their own community. And from that process, we can promote social integration and societal harmony. The second type of solidarity we want to talk about is we can understand the job of the civil service worker. This is because generally we believe, especially in countries, in some Asian country, civil service workers are largely isolated from the society. This is because most of them who work in civil service have moms or dads already working in civil service and understand the system, and they want their kids to follow there. An average normal human being would not likely to pursue those jobs because they have little understanding or they just don't have as much information as the kids who parents work in the civil service worker too. And this is bad because when most people don't understand what these people are doing and they see that these people are receiving tax money to work and live, it will create a lot of tension if they do not understand and do not know how to evaluate the efficiency and productivity of these workers. The fact that they now work in these jobs allow them to understand what these
Right.
workers are actually doing, enable for them to not create unfair responsibility or burden on these civil workers. Yes.
Yeah. What incentive does the government have to provide this level of training, given that people have to join the jobs anyways, and also there are limited government funds?
Yes, I think it will come to my second argument on why this will prevent labor shortage in these important sectors. Because these, like we said, the reason why a lot of countries, people are not very familiar with civil service worker is because it's very um, it's very difficult for you to access a lot of information, and mostly people recruit those who have worked in these sector instead of like completely new people from who have no knowledge and no background related to these jobs. The reason why is because it sometimes can relate to very politically sensitive information or environment like the military. So it's safer for you to recruit those who have a clean background and who will not have like, for instance, reactionary history in the past. So for that characteristic, it's very easy for you to have a labor shortage in this sector, and it's very dangerous. So when you train these people, and if you feel like there's a labor shortage in that field, it's easier for you to allocate people to work in these public sector, considering they have experience working in those things and they're now provided with incentives. It's also reduced the burden on recruitment because these are often require a lot of background checks and intensive training. With all of that being said, we think that this policy should be applied. Very proud to propose.
Thanks, PM, for your fine speech. Hello.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Uh, just give me a minute. Starting my speech in three, two, one. Panel-side government stands for a world that is literally a country that has stagnant growth because they do not have employees that stays for a long term and can see through development, which is crucial for these states to begin with, right? Note that there is a clear problem solution mismatch that government tries to visit, right? If the problem that they try to create is, oh, there's a lack of integration within society or diversity, I don't understand why mandating national services is the way to go about it. Like there's a lot of other ways, such as, I don't know, like create more like borders or like housing systems that promotes these things without the necessary mandating that goes into it, right? But also understand that OG tries to limit the scope of the debate by analyzing things such as military, analyzing military or workforces that are similar to military and paramilitaries. We tell you that national services and beyond that, and which is why I want to like re-characterize the debate for you and understand what this national mandate is. A few things to call out that, right? They talk about the age range, about how it's going to be like 20 to 40. We think that's significantly problematic as well because in the current status quo that which we are defending, people do stay in this national services for years beyond age of 40 because they need these national services to sustain their livelihood, right? So I don't understand why limiting the scope is significantly good for these particular socioeconomic groups, right? But also they tell you about how this period is going to be 1 to 2 years long enough to be meaningful. We tell you a lot of these national services, such as like engineering jobs, such as like planning sectors and development sectors, requires you to stay for more than 5 years. Because understand, even in countries where government changes after 5 years, employees are still there, right? Why so? So to see the planning process, to see the development go through and actually finalize. We tell you it's extremely problematic when you make the employees also temporary and keep replacing them, right? Because then you do not have constant development that happens in your country, because there's not employees that are staying for longer years to actually see through it, right? But understand what we actually think this debate looks like when you talk about mandating, right? This mandating will look like having like obviously, and I agree that which probably will look like a period of time, and we tell you that's significantly problematic because the government incentive to create benefits would then significantly decrease, or even have an employee retention, because they very well know that they can just replace the people if even if they mess up for one moment, right? But we tell you that this sectors does not only are not only limited to military, charity, and civil services like police and firefighting, the typical ones that we know, right? It also extends to any governmental jobs such as the engineering sectors, the educational sectors, and so forth, right? So we tell you how exactly does this work, right? Which means the moment in time when the government mandates this, they're likely to spread and divide the resources across all sectors to accommodate this large number of people coming in for these jobs, right? Because they have to accommodate the entire population because it's mandated for everyone, right? Which means that now, because of the fact that in the current status quo, the benefits are the only reason that people come into these jobs is because there are certain benefits that can provide advantages to certain socioeconomic groups, right? But right now, those when the moment in time you mandate them, government won't have the incentive to keep retaining these benefits because it's mandated, and they don't have to keep attracting people to even sign up to these jobs to begin with, right? Which means that the benefits would significantly lower down, right? But then also secondarily, it means that they're likely to spread the resources across all division, which means pays are going to be significantly lower, and all the benefits that we talk about are significantly lower. Understand that, which brings to my further argument that mandating national services national services harms under a socioeconomic group that relies on this as their source of income and a way to escape the cycle of poverty. Who are these people that we talk about? We talk about like morally poor people that do not come from great educational backgrounds due to various socioeconomic reasons that are government's fault anyways, like lack of funding, the areas that they were born into, probably having distance between them and a good school to even get into, right? Which means oftentimes private sector's jobs are inaccessible for this social group, right? Which is why they solely rely on national services to access the benefit. Because understand that many individuals, especially from those low income, cannot afford to take cannot more often than cannot even access those private jobs because of the high competition or the need for like high educational qualifications and whatnot, right? Which means that while civil services offer benefits such as job securities and like all of those things, long-term advantages are important for these socioeconomic groups before that term.
Do you think that most of these citizens will be high-ranking executives in this work sector?
Can you repeat that?
Do you think that most of the citizens in this program will be high-ranking executive and chief commander of these sectors?
No, it won't be, but which means that there will be also people who does come from good educational backgrounds, like privileged people that will also have to participate in, which means the competition in and of itself in the better sectors of these national services would increase, which means that these particular socioeconomic groups won't be able to access those better ones now because of a high competition that now exists in this job spectrum currently, right? Which means they will always be handed the lower benefits one, or the ones that are much more worse to work into, right? Like maybe working in lower rankings of the military and stuff like that, because of the fact that they probably have lower experiences, right? Which means that's significantly problematic because these individuals relied on these benefits, relied on this pension system, relied on this national services that now they cannot access because there is a high competition and a division of resources that happen. But even if they want to tell you that government would do a good job and would probably divide resources, we tell you that means that would be a budget reallocation, which means that benefit welfare programs would now see resources reallocated from them and into this mandatory job programs for the government to actually accommodate it, right? We tell you the impact is significantly detrimental because it takes away from poor people and gives to people who does not necessarily mean it, right? But more importantly, you don't have long-term employees that can see to the development of your country, which is significantly problematic for a country that needs employees to go through the development. For all that reason,
Thank you. Hello, Deputy Prime Minister.
All right. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Two responses. First of all, is that they said that if we constantly change people by giving them just a very quick period of time, like 1 or 2 years working in this, and it will never make any changes to the society. We do believe that that was never the point of this mandatory military training or mandatory service, civil services that we are trying to do. It's never about making changes or making development. Rather, it's about how to train people to build a solidarity or build an understanding of what the government is doing. So we do believe that yes, development in the country will not happen, and it doesn't matter. Second of all, is that oh sorry. Okay, sorry. Second of all, is that they said that because of this because of this mandate, less benefits being offered by the government just because there are more people joined in and they don't need to give them more benefits to attract people in. We do believe that it's a different story because government is still gonna have big benefit or big offer because they still need long time employees. They still need long people to stay there for a very long time. So the benefit offer for full time job still exists, and it doesn't really it's not really affected by this mandatory at all. Second of all, they said that these things challenge job of some people that can only access to I don't know public sector. I don't think that is the case because most of these people that join in this mandate won't really stay in these public sector jobs. Like for example, if I go to a military training and I am a university student learning in economics, then and after that I don't really have any reason why I have to stay to compete with those who can only join the military because they do not have enough educations. So we do believe that these public sector job doesn't really get challenged that much. In fact, we do believe that it get enough attentions for people to understand that what is this about, what does this job looks like, but not really is the reason why people will just immediately jump in and make the competition to get a job in public sector that popular because job in public sector has the it has some prejudice about this job is that it's pay less, is that it work for a very long hour, that it has less freedom. So being in this mandate will not ruin that and doesn't make people want to join in this thing for what gonna make many people want to join this job and then challenge the job of others underprivileged people that can only access to public sector job. So it doesn't make any sense. So back what our ideas about solidarity, we do believe that they have never successfully responded this because they only said that there is a lot of other way to connect people with each other, and they said something along the lines of just connect people via, I don't know, media or something. They never really explain to you, and now we explain to you that why these opportunity is unique, and it can only these kind of connections that can only happen if these kind of mandates really exist. The reason why, because first of all, as our first speaker said, different people have different incentive and capacity. For example, if I am a student in economics and I will never have any incentive at all to really connect with those who are underprivileged because it because it will actually affect to my benefit, because if I spend time working with them, it will lower my professional progression or something. So normally, people with different backgrounds, people with different incentive, and people with different capacity have no incentive whatsoever to actually connect with each other for that much time. The problem is, if you do not spend that much time, you cannot really understand the struggle or even the personality of people in different groups. This mandate things is the thing that forced them to actually understand that. And second of all, that they do not have to actually spend too much effort that gain nothing, because as we say, you still give them some kind of wages and salary, meaning that they can both learning how to connect with others, learning about differences, learning about how different group of people is living, how their personality, how their interest is, without really without really have to waste too much of your benefit of your own and still gain something from it. And this thing is unique because under no circumstances in their cases that they have these chances for people to unite with each other. First of all, that to unite with each other is already a hard thing, because if I am a if I am a higher class or even higher middle class, I have no incentive whatsoever to interact with people in the underprivileged class, because we have different jobs. We most likely care about different things, and we most likely join in different events. So normally, never will I join in an event that have underprivileged people or even people from different places, other different places. But in this, when you are putting into the same military training camp, or you are putting in the same, as I say, engineer camp or whatsoever, you are forced to interact with them. You are forced to work with them, understand them, live with them for a period of time, like 1 year and 2 years, and this create for them the understanding of how the different people in my country live life, how different background, how different region in my country affect people, and we do believe that it create for people a broad understanding of where do they live, where are they privileged or not, what should I feel about other group of people, and overall it creates solidarity because it could create connection among people. But more important is that our first speaker said is that it creates the understanding of what the government is doing, and this is important because most of the time people do not trust the government because they don't even know what the government do, because the government just do everything in secret most of the time, and you don't really understand the work of the government. This create the understanding of the work of the government and overall create for you a trust in the system. So with the trust and the connection in people and the trust in the system, we do believe that solidarity can only be achieved by the government. Very proud to propose. Samurai. Man, and
Thank you, speaker, for the
sorry.
if you fine. Thank you, speaker, for the fine speech. Request TL to extend on opening up.
I'm just checking that I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just give me a second to sort out my papers. So my speech in 3, 2, 1. The issue of labor shortage in national services has never been about people wanting to find solidarity and connect with different groups. It has never been about poor interest in national services or distrust in the government, but it has always been about poor access. The fact that government jobs typically give incredibly poor pay, poor benefits, and have a very high barrier to entry. Let's go through government OG's case so far, right? They talk a lot about how the whole purpose of their case is for the sake of solidarity. They even go as so far as to say that development does not matter in the case of this debate. I'm going to go ahead and attack and say that this is an incredibly shallow take on the debate here today. Why is it that there is such an urgency to attract people to national services? We say that it's first and foremost, there's always going to be a need for productivity. Because when we talk about motion itself, obviously we're talking about these countries which lack this sort of attraction to national services. There's an urgency to handle their welfare and their infrastructure through these national services. And therefore, all the development for this is done through these national services, meaning that the need for these workers is incredibly high. Why is it that on the comparison, this solidarity does not matter at all? Understand that solidarity in and of itself is just uncomparable towards the individual need for a living wage and things such as welfare handled through national services. Sure, it is nice to make friends, but there's no point in making friends if you're not really being paid much and you're not getting that much access to benefit. But secondly, there is absolutely no demand for solidarity and connection in general. We've never seen protests about people saying that we need to bring solidarity into the country, that we need to have a mix of different socioeconomic classes. If I'm being very, very real, I would say that poor people don't want to mix with rich people simply due to the fact that rich people tend to be stuck up. Then is there a demand for? We say that there is a very high demand for access to government jobs, things such as career progression, things such as living wages. And the best example that I can give you is what's going on in Bangladesh right now. People literally going to the streets and rioting for the sake of given government jobs, which means people want these government jobs and people want to ensure that they're able to make a living through these government jobs. The reason why those jobs are so attractive is because of the high retention, so on and so forth. And I'm going to bring it back what my leader of opposition has already told you, right? That these jobs have often been a safe haven for those from lower socioeconomic, these individuals who can afford a high level of education, these individuals who would not be able to get these high wages in the private sector and would be screwed over in any other avenue of life. These are the people which need long-term access towards these government jobs, And if it's true that these rich people can afford to work in this private sector, then why is it that you put out a national mandate in which you fill up all these spaces, include with these people who can afford to work in the private sector? This is why our point on retention is so important, because they try to posit to you that this retention will be unaffected. We see that the likelihood of having these long-term jobs is going to be incredibly low because there is a desperation to fill up that national mandate and ensure that everybody can work in the same different sectors, Therefore, the likelihood of you keeping someone around for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years is incredibly low because you must hire them in order to allow all other 20-year-olds and new grads to come in and work in your sector regardless of background. Now, I'm only going to talk about one more thing in which they kind of assert a lot of government incentives here. They talk about how there's going to be very good wages and there's going to be very good training, but we see that the likelihood of it is incredibly low because previously these wages and these training is what it was used, is exactly what was used in order to attract people into this sector in the first place. We say that the moment that you remove the government need to attract people into these sectors by virtue of these things, it's the exact same moment in which the government is no longer incentivized to spend their resources on things such as wages and training, which means that the wages are actually going to be comparably lower towards our world in which you practice a meritocracy and people not only need to prove their merit, but you need to prove that you deserve to have a worker like them. But secondly, things such as training and allowing people to get better in the education that they need to get into greater jobs and have career progression is much, much lower. But I'm going to move on to the arguments that I'll be bringing up in a second today, which is I'm going to be talking about the principle of personal liberty. What I'm pushing now is that you are essentially ensuring a removal of choice. You're going to make it mandatory to join national services, and it is unlikely that individuals are going to be able to choose the sector that they want to work in. When we're talking about the military, government offices, charities, so on and so forth, given that the problem that side OG is positing is the labor shortage, it is unlikely that these individuals will have the privilege of choosing exactly what sector they will work in, but rather will be thrown into the sector which has a labor shortage and needs people to work in it, especially the unpopular ones, right, like military, so on and so forth. But secondly, I want to argue under this point. The second point I want to bring up under this argument is that people actually care about their choice of work. They often choose their work based on things such as wages, personal interests, so your health, so on and so forth. These are all things that go into the thought process of what work you want to take up. And people care about these personal liberties. There's been a global trend in favor of these personal liberties, a rise in protests and volatile voters, and the world is more political than ever. Therefore, the biggest impact coming from this argument is that you're essentially harming individuals' personal liberties. But sure, I'll take that POI. Hello?
Yeah, what's the difference between the government force you to have education and with this motion?
Yeah, the difference between forcing an education and this motion is that people ask for an education. People ask for free, cheap education, and people understand the benefit of that free education. But also, additionally, the fact that the government is always going to be incentivized to pour money into education because it allows that development to be better. We don't see why you'll be pushing more wages and more training into these government services when you don't need to attract people into it anymore. Now, I'm going to take it a step further on this personal liberty point and bring up an even bigger extension about not only are you taking away that personal liberty, you're taking it away to force people into shitty positions where wages are low, job retention is low, and career growth is low, simply by virtue of the motion and by the mechanism given by side OG, right? Which means that on the comparative, in the best case scenario, what they can give to you is solidarity between different socioeconomic classes. We say, compared to our worst case scenario where, people don't get along, at least the protection of those personal liberties and those choices and your ability to incentivize the government to do better is still there. And for that, we win. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, for the fine speech. With this, we come to the end of first half of the debate. I request member of CUF to open and close the talk. Please do.
I'm audible?
Yes,
I think I'm audible, right? Okay, great. Internet is a not that stable, so anytime you cannot hear me, just feel free to just like interrupt me. Why we need this motion? It is because no one wants to be a policeman, no one wants to be a soldier at the first place. Both at the house need to spend the resources to let the people to become it. There's at the house need to glorify it at the first place. I just don't know why the OO can save the resources. For two possible reasons that people do not want to join and we have to use this motion and which is status quo. First is soldiers and policemen is too toilsome, too hard, too tough, and too dangerous. People don't want to join. But second reason is just like the policeman system is shitty. It looks like the black people like initially do not want to be a police because they think the policeman is someone who like bully them, who oppress them at the first place, and then let the police areas become more and more racist, like in the last 20 years at the first place. The first response extension is like to prove why our state house will give poor people better chance. Or say it will be highly competitive and it will take away poor people's chance. I think first, highly competitive doesn't mean it will take away poor people's chance. As we already frame out in this motion, that most of the jobs in the motion is because they're too tough, they're too like troublesome, so people do not want to join. Rich people, yes, they will spend 1 or 2 years here, but because they have other better chance to be a crazy like econ workers or whatever, they will leave anyways, which means the promotion is still for poor people. The rich people will leave 1 or 2 years afterwards. The chance is still for poor people anyways. But second, I will flip it. But when the time Donald Trump's son have to be in the American army, they're likely better treatment and better education and better like whatever training into these areas at the first place. But secondarily, because democracy is games of number, when everyone have to be forced in those kind of areas, which means necessarily the voter base were giving them a better like welfare onto these areas at the first place. The implication is because their state house is very limited of the poor people going to these areas. Nobody give a fuck on them, and there's very low training and very bad welfare on them. There's no benefit and no wage on them. But because our cities have democracy, because the rich people's kids are also in these areas, you have to pay more. You have to have a better training on them at the first place. How you should weigh this argument at the first place? I think with the OG says solidarity. No, this is not exclusive, as all point out. There's other way to create solidarity, to create the communication, and it's also not certain whether you can create the solidarity at the first place. But when the time our state house forced the rich people's kids to come in, while every single voters will vote for the well-being of the soldiers' areas, there's no longer the torturing of the soldier at the first place. There's no longer that soldiers have to training to the death and even do not have the good food. At least for the most vulnerable, who those people who being torturing in the soldier areas, they have better food, they have better training. For the poor people, they have better skills at the first place. From the accent of the benefit, we tell you we're stopping the torture. There's a much bigger accent of the benefit at the first place. For the exclusiveness, we say that it's only way for the rich people to come in when the time is democracy, everyone to join, we can change these shady areas at the first place. Second response, OO say 2 years conscription will be opportunity cost that people cannot find a job. I will also flip it. For the middle class and upper class people, I don't give a fuck on them because they can find a job anyways. But for the poor people who are extremely poor, who do not even have the chance to join into those kind of soldier areas, because the soldier at least have a you have to be a middle school graduator, right? But when the time everyone have to join, which means those kind of extremely poor people who do have a little bit lazy have to go into these kind of soldier areas at the first place. They have been forced to be in training at the first place. Because the second mechanism I tell you, we have better training, we train those kind of poor people. The poor people can learn something in those soldier areas, which means after they being even if out of the soldier areas, they can still have the better skill and find a better job. We still let the poor people have a well-being. Because we tell you, poor people can get promotion anyways. Rich people do not want to be soldiers forever. Poor people still get a chance, but more importantly, for the poor people who do not join the soldier areas, they come in and get a better training. We let the poor people be much better. The old case doesn't make sense at the first place. The second extension on vertical extension on races. OG's claim is there's less discrimination because there's more communication between diversified communities, which is quite shady mechanism. It's right for the old to point out that we can create communication in many different ways. I will tell you much more than that, than why our state house can let those kind of poor people, let the black, can stop in the races and let those kind of black people have a better life. First, when the time everyone can join, that's a tipping point that the black people have to join these areas at the first place. Because timing now, the black people just hate the police a lot. Very, very few black police in the USA or black people want to be a police in the USA at the first place. Where everyone have to join, which means because there's now just have one or two black policemen in their areas, but timing now every single black police have to come in. Our state house have a higher proportion of the black policemen that definitely won't be racist at the first place. But their state house, because they have more white people, that very few black people joining, their state house is more racist policemen in their work at the first place. But second, when we have more black policemen, we can create a systematic change. It looks like the training of the policemen can't be racist because there's the black people there. It also looks like because there are more and more black policemen in those areas, the daily talk of the policemen cannot be racist, cannot be racial, or cannot be hate speech at the first place. Because there's more black policemen who join in, the daily talk and those training systems have to change and it will make at the first place. Yes, POI.
Yeah, more black police is a benefit exclusive to America. Can you tell me why this debate specifically takes place in America rather than other countries such as Bangladesh and Malaysia, where the government said things are much more demanded for?
Bro, this go read the WCC judging manual. Motion is in the average democracy countries, so the motion is not talking about Bangladesh but more about America. You didn't read the debate manual. Last, it is just as there is more there is more black policemen at the first place. Even if the races exist anyways, that it's just because more and more black policemen, they can rule and monitor their own groups and their own communities to stopping those kind of races to ruling these areas to bully you at the first place. Semologically, in soldier and more than black soldiers to join in means higher deterrence, they have to change and means better chance they can rule better. This is a much bigger impact because educating solidarity, what's the impact? But I will say how stopping the races to rule you and system land change. Last, on the principle, the government can force you to obey the laws because it protects others. Our state house also protect those black people to protect them at the first place. So logically, if we can protect people, we can do the laws so we can helping the people. When we also tell you we can helping the poor people. It's just like education. If we prove to you that it's benefit to you, we can also force you as a government. Last, I also I'll give it to you that is systematic change. We can stopping the suffering. This is biggest impact. CJ have to take this wrong.
Thank member of government, member of opposition.
Hi, can I check I'm visible and audible?
Yeah, both.
Okay, good. I want to first deal with OG and CG's claim that this is education and empowerment for poor people. Quite intuitively with a few financial constraints, and there are a few structural reasons for this. Number one, governments often have limited money. Usually this is bolstered by the private sector. So in things like education and job opportunities, there is the private sector to fill in where the governments can't, because private sectors pay more generally. Governments have limited money, so even in the status quo, people want to opt for the private sector. So it's very unlikely that poor people would be better on the gov side. Number two, many governments are in economic recession. We see the decline of the US dollar. The Feds are cutting interest rates at the end of this year. So there simply isn't enough money to go around and give everybody a living wage. So the wage that they're going to get on gov is likely to be quite low. Number three, and I just want to be very clear on this, what education or what upskilling can you get from the gov if you are a soldier? Three things to say on this. One, being in the military is often a lifelong commitment. That is to say, people climb up the ranks and you have no transferable skills, which is the second thing. You can't really pivot out of the military into a private job later on simply because your skills aren't transferable. What are you going to say? I learned discipline, how to wake up at 6 every day. I learned how to handle a gun. These are things which don't translate to the private sector. So insofar as governments will hang their hat on education and upskilling, they already lose the debate. But even if you don't buy any of this, it's a 2-year conscription period, guys. What can you learn from it? What soldiers can you get from it? I also don't know. I'm gonna do 2 extensions from CO. One, we're gonna ask why conscription is necessary. Spoiler alert, it's not. Number 2, we're gonna be very charitable and say even if we take Gov at their best, they promote nationalism and having a larger army is bad. I will integrate all my responses. 1, let's look at the core question of this debate. The first thing we need to ask on op is conscription necessary? The first thing we will say on CO is that there is largely no need for soldiers. 3 reasons for this. 1, the world is mostly about globalization and soft power now. Most global superpowers outside of Russia don't engage in outright wars and wanton violence. I mean, obviously Israel, Gaza, it's probably a separate issue, but most countries of the world don't have an army and aren't at risk of getting invaded anytime soon. Even China, probably the strongest country in the world, doesn't outright invade Taiwan or outright go into the Philippines and take all the land, even though they can, because people just don't. We're not in the colonialist era anymore, so we don't need soldiers. The second thing is there's often a high human cost to wars, so people don't want to die. That's why people in the US are so reluctant to put boots on the ground, even when it comes to fighting Russia and saving Ukraine, right? They look at things like drones. So the characterization is that largely we don't need a soldier. So Gov needs to prove to us why soldiers are so freaking important. On op, we say useless, no soldiers. Even if nobody joins, we don't care. We don't need soldiers. Number 2, even if we need soldiers, we think soldiers who voluntarily go into the army are better than forced conscription. What does Gov have to contend with? They have to contend with a few things, right? People who aren't fit enough for the military, people who aren't motivated enough to be there simply because they were conscripted in. There are 2 problems with it. The first, as Oo correctly points out, is that there is a short conscript period. So you can't make a damn good soldier in just the 1 or 2 year period. But second problem is low motivation. The outcome on CO we say is this hamstrings your army because your army is only as strong as your weakest link. So the army on Gulf is very unlikely to be very good. There's a reason in the status quo why there are only about 2,000 Navy SEALs and they are so damn good compared to the Marines. It's because they are highly motivated. It's because you can concentrate training on people who need it and people who are really good instead of like just conscripting everybody and hoping they become good soldiers. The bottom line is this has massive financial costs and this is inefficient usage of resources. I think all deals with this, so I'm not going to rehash. Number two, let's be very charitable to Gulf and say that they have a strong army. No, thank you. I'll take you later. Even if we buy OG that we have less people in these sectors, they never prove why we need people in these sectors. Like, what is the benefit of having an army if there are no wars? What is the benefit of having more people in charity? We contend that, right? We say people always want to move to the military and people always want to move to charity. And the reasons for this are quite intuitive. The military does not require a degree. So if anyone is disproportionately in the military, it's usually poor people who have no opportunities to get other degrees. But second reason is people like feeling good. So people like working for charities and will do it anyway. Gov needs to defend everybody in the military and everybody in charity. It's not a debate of whether charity is good or not. It's a debate of putting everybody inside. We don't think they prove that. There are three reasons we think it's really bad for nationalism. In a bit. The first is that creating a national identity discriminates against people who are not from the country. This legitimizes racism because it is very easy for bigots to play the, oh, they did not serve the country like I did card. So it's not only about religion and skin color. On a scale, people have now one more metric to discriminate against refugees and immigrants because they did not serve the country like I did. So that's bad. The second thing is the experience during conscription is likely to be bad for minorities. The problem with the Gulf is that they jump to the conclusion that putting people together equals unity and putting people together equals they'll get into positions of power, i.e. black people and policemen. We think it's more likely that minority groups will be bullied. By definition, being a minority group means there's very little of you. We think it's more likely that people get to legitimize bias against you. They're gonna say things like, oh my goodness, this guy is poor. This guy does not speak good English. This person is so weak. A person from this race is so weak. Before that, I'll take a point. If anyone has one. Probably CG.
Yeah, why Singapore or Korea, many countries need conscription and then, like, they will train harder. If they are training harder, they are more diligent. They can still find a good job rather than be a lazy poor people who do not want to join the soldier.
Dude, I just told you, training in the military or working in a charity doesn't help you find a better job. Like, you know what helps you find a better job? Going to uni, actually going to an education institution, actually studying what you're passionate about. Holding a gun doesn't make you a better job in your next job. You need to prove that on CG. So it doesn't matter whether it's true, right? People are likely to latch onto these individual cases like, oh, look, the black guy messed up during training, and people are likely to make fun of him. What's the comparative? In real life, people have support structures. They are surrounded by their friends and their families. They can, like, at least they face racism in real life, but they have support structures around them. In the military, they are conscripted, they live away from friends and family, they are surrounded by people from different genders, right? The military system promotes a hierarchy. People can't complain to your superiors if your superior is racist. Like, the military promotes a hierarchy and people are very unlikely to speak up against it. In real life, you have HR, you have friends and family, you can claim discrimination, you can file a lawsuit. All this does not happen because the military happens in an isolated part of the country. So we think it's more likely that people live worse lives. What have we proven in CO? We think armies are largely unnecessary, and even if they are necessary, you make the experience worse for minorities. Very proud to oppose.
Thank you, Speaker, for the fine speech. Government's work.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Just wait a second. Okay. Okay, my speakers, I prefer POI on in the chat. And okay, my speakers starting 3, 2, 1. Three response to CEO's case. The first thing that they misunderstanding this kind of motion is that it is everybody have to serve for the military for periods of time. Not all people or all these kind of soldiers will suddenly join and nobody do other kind of jobs. It is doesn't looks like it is it doesn't look like in CEO's case portray that every people have to devote all of the time into this kind of military or into this kind of national services. It just looks like more like a part-time jobs or people or different kind of people having different kind of periods of time to join in this kind of national services. Three response to their cases. First, let's to respond to the things that they say this kind of job is not transferable, but we're going to say that these kind of things is transferable and it is important. It is more likely be a very general skills. For example, when you join in the national services, you're having this kind of incentive and having capacity to learn to be hardworking. You learn how to cooperate with other kind of people, learn how to do the group work, and this is a winning this is a very important metric for these kind of companies to care about to care and to evaluate whether these kind of people can fit in their companies. And also, it is very intuitively to believe that cooperation skills and hardworking metric, it is important when you seeing these kind of spirits in university or seeing this kind of spirit in the companies. We are going to see that these kind of skills it's important when you join this kind of national services. And also, we're going to say that it is these kind of things. It is the best way for this kind of citizens to learn this kind of general skill rather than in the opposition side. They never prove the real comparative to tell us what is in their study house they can teach these kind of poor people to learn this kind of skills, or how in their study house they can help in the poor people to break this kind of bias or break this kind of corruption societies. But second of all, we're going to say that this kind of motion is not only target to the soldier. Even if CEO talking about soldier is not important or national service is not important, let's just say this intuitively it's intuitively wrong, because you still need this kind of basic infrastructure services. You still need this kind of endowment insurance. You still have to care about these very basic national services, and every country or every kind of society need these kind of things as a very basic necessities to support this kind of to support the running of these kind of countries. And we still need the people to serve for. But however, in comparative, in our city house, when you're doing this kind of enforcement, when you're doing this kind of mandation for all of the people have to join this kind of national services, you just divide this kind of burden for the poor people. But in opposition side, you're just giving this kind of overwhelming burden for the most vulnerable group to letting them to doing this kind of letting them to do this kind of most hardworking job. It's in their city house, you're just giving overwhelming power to the privileged people to saying that it is not my burden to join this kind of national services. You're just pushing the overwhelming burden to the most vulnerable group they claim about, because in their city house they claim about that people will be enforced to join different kind of private sectors to join these kind of sectors. But however, we think the biggest problem in opposition in both CO and OO is that they ideally assume that in their city house there will be no enforcement. But however, this is wrong, because it's only in their city house we're not doing this kind of mandation or this giving privileged people more capacity or more opportunity to enforce the poor people or to oppress the most vulnerable people. But however, comparatively, it's in our city house when my partner telling you that it's in our city house when you're giving this kind of giving this burden and giving this kind of pressure on the government to increase the insurance, to promoting the training. It's only our city house. This is a tipping point. You can give in more welfare to the people when they join the national services. It's only our city house. You giving people you creating more attention on the national services. But also let's respond to OO's case. OO's main two case is about first about job accessibility. To respond. First of all, we think that they assume they just having the same problem with DO, to assume that in their work, they suddenly will not be enforcement. Everybody can have an equal job. Everybody can find their ideal jobs. They need to prove out why in their city house they can have in this kind of positive cases, but we never think this in their city house. They bring this kind of true comparative within this kind of debate. But more importantly, we're going to tell you that it's only in their city house there will be inherent bully and inherent bias and inherent corruption, and nobody care and nobody notice these kind of things. Because in our city house, when you mandation this kind of police system or national services system, the people or the government have to pay this kind of attention. People and government or the whole system have this kind of more check and balance to check this kind of bully, to check in this kind of corruption. But in their city house, they just under a shallow zone. Nobody noticing these kind of things, but continuously oppress the poor people, continuously oppress this kind of vulnerable group. But second of all, we think that it's only only outside the house, when you enlarge and putting this commendation, especially on the rich people, you just broaden this kind of exposure on the bully, and more people are having this kind of check and balance to look at these kind of national services. But more importantly is that when everyone doing this kind of responsibility to this kind of national job, people will default to the idea this is the right thing to do, and people will default and inherently thinking like joining the national services is a good thing. And also that is to say, when more and more people will default these kind of ideas or default join the national services is a good thing, that is to say there are less bias or they are less bias for people when they after they like completing the national services. And also we thinking that, and also we have already telling you that it's only outside the house, like giving the pressure to the national services or letting more rich people to like share the burden with the majority of people. It is a tipping point to let the government or let the whole society noticing that this is that you need you have to promoting this kind of quality of the training. You have to reallocate the resources for the national services. This is a tipping point for most of the people, and more regulation to put on the national services. But second of all, they are talking about like resources allocation. Three response why we flip these kind of cases. First is that national services mean that you're having a high relation with the government and countries themselves. This is the time when more and more people join in and represent for national services. Government having an incentive to promote more funding and relocate resources than the current status quo. Because in the comparative, in their house, they just doing nothing. They just inherently believe that it is the right thing to exploit the most vulnerable people, to choose them to do the most exhausted jobs. But however, it's in our Senate house, when you target when you're doing these kind of things, the resources is targeted to the stakeholder that currently needs this kind of resources. So the relocation of resources, it is meaningful and it is targeted to the right person, especially for the poor people. But second of all, Alex has responded to you that high competition doesn't mean that you have to take away this kind of things. So it oftentimes means that it's only our Senate house you're having a tipping point to having more funding, but also you're having a better scale of the impact to help the most vulnerable group. Very proud to propose.
Thank the web opera. It's you're very like your voice is a little low. Can you like try speaking louder?
Yeah,
Like
can you hear
put your
me?
mic. Just it's fine.
Okay, wait a second. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, the whole government bench apparently is built on the fact that everyone does not want to be a soldier, no one's going to volunteer, and apparently poor people cannot get jobs and they cannot get trained because, and their side just consistently says that apparently poor people on our side on their side can still get jobs and can get trained, even though we tell you that jobs are not the job in the military is not transferable to real life. We tell you that number one, they said on our side that we are not likely to have a military because of the fact that people don't want to be soldiers. This is number one untrue because largely people want to join because number one, you don't need a degree to join. Number two, most likely poor people want to join because you don't need a degree, you don't need education. It's an easy career that you don't need any experience to join to. Number two, we tell you that even if we have no people at all, we tell you that military is still unnecessary because of the fact that in status quo, no country is just randomly invading random people just for the fun of it. Most countries don't even need a military in status quo because of the fact that right now we're not living in World War II. You don't need to constantly defend yourself, and you do not need to do anything about your military. And also, you also have to realize that on your side, on our side, we prioritize the people who actually want to be there. On your side, you have to concede that some people don't want to be there. Some people do not want to serve the nation. Some people are not fit, and some people do not do their best. This is and this is important because you are spending your resources on these very people who you appointed to serve your nation. If these people are forced into serving the nation, yet they don't do their best because they were forced into it, they don't want to do it in the first place, we tell you that you are wasting your resources that is very expensive, because in these period of national service, you have to provide for them housing, you have to provide for them accommodation and training that needs resources. We tell you that you're wasting these resources on people who do not want to help in the first place. You can't confirm that these people want to help because you force them. On our side, it's different because CG provides you, because CO provides you the fact that we actually prioritize people who volunteer in the first place. This makes sure that these people want to help. These people volunteered themselves to serve the country.
Point.
Therefore, we can assure that our money is used, our resources is used properly anyway. They also never engage with my MO, saying, because my MO said that armies are unnecessary. Even if we have a smaller army on our side, we are not still in World War I or World War II. We don't need large armies, and the bottom line is we don't need large armies. We do not need to waste our resources on these large armies. And even if we do, we don't waste resources on unqualified people who do not want to be there in the first place. They have never engaged with my first speaker on anything because of the fact that, okay, number two, they constantly say that poor people can get jobs on their side and they can get trained, because apparently on our side they can't get jobs at all. Apparently on our side they are going to die because they don't have the chance to go into military. Apparently if they go into military, they're saved and they can get money because I don't know that kind of logic. I don't understand that logic, because there's absolutely zero training that actually relates and actually transfers to real life. How does shooting a gun or running around the jungle make me a better lawyer? How does any of the training provided in the national service actually transfers to me being a better person in the real world? We tell you this is no logic in this place, in the first place, because poor people on our side, they volunteer for military service, they volunteer, they get the chance to actually be in the military. On your side, yes.
Yes, volunteer in the army anyways. But because the CG have more rich people's keys in the army that is more voter based, CG have a higher money capital that can do the things you want. Poor people may not get a job on both sides house, but still we can provide higher wages because of rich people joining and also because of voter base.
Okay, you said that apparently the poor people get higher wages when they are forced to join in a military, but we tell you this is not true, because on your side you have to concede that if you mandate conscription, there will be more people joining the military. There is a fixed amount that the government provides for the military. The more people there are, the less wages there are going to be given to every single one of these people. The fact that the poor people are forced to go in for lower wages and are paid the same amount that as the rich people that are in the same national service is very unfair, because they can be doing their own jobs right now, and the sad part is that once they get out of this military service, they wasted 1 to 2 years of their lives getting no experience and getting no skills that actually transfer to what they can do in the future, what they can do to provide to the family. All of that is thrown away because you force them, and we tell you that they get less wages even if a lot of people join, because the government cannot provide for every single person sufficiently. The more people join, the less money each person will get. We tell you that your side, they never provide any logical link to how poor people can get jobs, how poor people can get trained after the fact that they get after the fact that they serve in the military. Number three, they consistently say that on their side, they apparently reduce discrimination. They assume that people being together in the national service will immediately promote unity, because the more people together, they'll communicate and they'll be a happy family. This is completely false, because in reality, this will cultivate discrimination, because you can't deny that some people are just racist, some people just are not like friendly type who want to be friends with everyone, because why not? It's a happy world, right? Now, we tell you this is true because on my first speaker, he's already given many examples, like maybe white people pointing out that black people messing up in training and making fun of them. Maybe the fact that that the black people who are already a minority or some minority in general, when they are put into the military service, they are basically one person in a sea of many people who do not know about them, who do not respect them because they are racist. We tell you that this is not a world where if many people are together, they will be happy family. They just cultivate this without any sort of logical link. That is why we tell you that discrimination is going to cultivate anyway. Now, okay, on our side, basically, CG tells you that number one, conscription is unnecessary. Number two, you're wasting resources. Number three, people can on our side, poor people are not forced to waste their 1 to 2 years of their lives. Number three, we tell you that discrimination is going to happen inevitably on your side. This is why C or easily wins. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for all the science speeches. We'll take